From New York, it's That Kevin Show.
See, I knew it.
Come on, Kev. What's a few classified documents between friends?
I told you all the time. I knew it. I knew he had some too.
Here he is, That Kevin McCullough.
All right, my next guest is no stranger to those of you that may have watched Fox News for many, many years. He has bounced around a couple of places since leaving that network. He is currently the White House correspondent for Newsmax, but he's the author of a great new book on the former SCOTUS, I think, champion of conservative thought, Justice Antonin Scalia. Ladies and gentlemen, put your hands together and welcome James Rosen. Hey, James, it's good to see you. Thanks for being here.
Kevin, thank you for having me.
It's an honor. I've always been a huge fan of yours. Your ability to tell the facts and kind of not let anything else get in the way was always noticeable in the reporting that I came to enjoy. But you also have a very dry wit about you when you would banter back and forth with the studio talent. And I just always appreciated your approach to things.
Thank you so much.
Congrats on the book. Scalia is not an easy subject, and there have been several good books about Scalia since his passing. What created your interest in wanting to take on this lion of the Supreme Court?
Well, thanks for having me, Kevin. I actually knew Justice Scalia a little bit. When I was 30 years old back in 1999, and I first got to Washington to become a Washington correspondent for Fox News at the time, one of the first things that I did was write to Justice Scalia and request an interview with him. This commenced a correspondence between us that spanned about 2 years, and which was really unusual and amusing in spots. Excerpts from that will appear in Volume 2. We also had a pair of one-on-one lunches at his favorite place, the AV Ristorante Italiano, a pretty modest Italian restaurant, now long defunct, where we drank wine together. He made me eat off of his plate. I said, Mr. Justice, I couldn't. He said, come on. So now I'm shoveling vegetables off of Justice Scalia's plate into my mouth. And he drove me back to my office in his car both times. And so I got to know him, and he was very generous to me a long time ago when I was a young reporter. And I resolved that someday I would write about him. What I found is that the two existing books about Antonin Scalia that are out there, the biographies of him, one of which he cooperated with extensively, the other not at all. Both turned out in pretty much the same place, which is to say fairly open in their contempt for Justice Scalia's jurisprudence and his legacy and his conduct. So this book, Scalia Rise to Greatness, which is just out now, this tells the story of Antonin Scalia's first 50 years of his life, and it ends with him taking his seat on the Supreme Court. But I say it's the first accurate history of Scalia because it's the first admiring biography of him.
Well, it's interesting that you say that, because I know that even in his passing and the kind of suspicious nature of what went down and how people felt about that, there's been much speculation about what his legacy would end up being. And I can imagine that the contempt came from the fact that he actually was a justice who decided constitutionality based on what he said he would base it on. And that is the words of the Constitution itself.
Well, first of all, Scalia had a really profound and important career and a very exciting life before he ever became a judge and then a justice on the Supreme Court. And we tell that story in Scalia Rise to Greatness, the story of his Catholic upbringing, his immigrant experience, his father having come here with $400, not knowing English and becoming a Romance languages professor, his mother, the daughter of Italian immigrants, becoming a school teacher. All of this had a profound impact on him, his Catholic faith, and the particular influence of his father, who as a Romance languages professor was always leery of an original text being distorted somehow by a translator or an interpreter. And so Scalia brought this into his judging. But at the time that he was a federal judge, first on the Court of Appeals for 4 years, then to the Supreme Court, the prevalent notion in the law was a liberal one known as the living Constitution, the idea that the Constitution's meaning should expand and breathe like a living organism to accommodate for modern phenomena that the founders could never have envisioned, such as nuclear weapons or the internet. And that in order to give the Constitution its living quality, judges should not just look at the text of the law or the Constitution, but should go back to the legislative intent, find out what was said on those House and Senate floor debates and what was said in those committee reports that were generated along the way as the bill snaked its way toward enactment. Scalia, as a judge, stood athwart all of that, Kevin. He said, in deciding or interpreting the meaning of the Constitution or any statute passed since then, which is what judges do for a living, is interpret statutes and laws and tell us what they mean, we should be guided by the original meaning of the Constitution or any statute at the time that it was enacted, what it was widely understood to mean when it was enacted. We should find out what the original meaning was chiefly by looking at the text of the thing, not some extraneous process like the floor debates or the committee reports, which nobody voted on, but the text of the law. So these twin concepts of originalism and textualism that Scalia championed, it really amounted to a revolution in the law that is still with us in every area of American life today, because so many judges, so many law students, so many lawyers who argue before judges and justices now emphasize these very concepts that Scalia championed.
And I think that there's great evidence to point to the fact that where the court is right now in the Joe Biden administration era is a direct result of Scalia's influence with originalism and textualism, and is replicated in now what the majority of the court has in terms of viewpoints. But let me go back to the substance of your book, because this is part of a two-book telling of his life, and you're into the kind of the juicy, meaty, fun stuff that a lot of people don't know. What will people be surprised by about Justice Antonin Scalia's upbringing and childhood and the type of life he experienced before donning the black robe?
Well, just if you check out the photo section, and this book, Scalia: Rise to Greatness, has a number of previously unpublished photographs that tell the story of his first 50 years. The last photograph is of the Supreme Court when he got onto it, with William Rehnquist elevated as the Chief Justice. But one of the photographs shows Antonin Scalia, Nino Scalia, as he was known by friends, at the age of 17, graduating from high school. The high school he was valedictorian of, which was a rare hybrid institution. It was a Jesuit private school that was also a military academy, with the highest standards on both ends in terms of the academics and the military regiment in which he participated. And the photograph in the photo section shows his graduation photo as a cadet. And it's really striking just how great looking Antonin Scalia was at 17, with his perfectly parted hair and his winning smile. And he was in a very fit condition at the time as a cadet, and he's got his chest full of ribbons and so on. And of course, he was the valedictorian as well. It's an amazing photograph to see, and it's revelatory, but it's just one of many revelations in this book. I think one thing that our listeners and our viewers will be most interested in will be that among the many different sets of documents that I'm the first to bring to bear about different phases of his life, perhaps the most entertaining are what I call the RBG Nino papers from the chambers of Ruth Bader Ginsburg and Antonin Scalia, not on the Supreme Court, but where they first met each other in 1982 as judges on one rung below the Court of Appeals for the District of Columbia Circuit, often described as the second most powerful court in the world, in the nation.
Very interesting place to pause for our break. We're coming right back. He's James Rosen.
Stick around for more of That Kevin. Next, That Kevin Show with Kevin McCullough.